welcome everyone to Middle East Insights and to the International Dialogue series. And today I'm really very happy that we have completed with today 100 talks in just 8 months. And that is a big feat for us. And this is a milestone for us because A, we don't do any gatekeeping, there's no agenda setting, we do not take funding from anyone. And somehow we have survived. And today, which is also marking 1 month of Pahalgam terrorist attack, we are in conversation with Tom Cooper, who is Austrian aerial warfare analyst and historian. And the topic for today's discussion is India's air campaign in Operation Sindoor. If I want to give a list of all the books that our esteemed guest has written, this is going to take the entire lifetime, actually. It's more than 50 plus books, actually. But I'll give a brief introduction. Tom Cooper is an Austrian aerial warfare analyst and historian. Specialization is in Middle Eastern air forces, including those of Egypt, Iran, Iraq, and Syria, as well as various African and Asian air forces. He is a regular correspondent for multiple defense-related publications. He has authored and co-authored more than 50 books and more than 1,000 articles, with notable work including a multi-volume analysis of Arab air forces in wars against Israel, 1955 to 73, such as the Arab MIGs series, which was in 6 volumes, and the African MIG series in 2 volumes. His expertise extends to contemporary conflicts, including Russian operation in Syria, 2015 to 17, and the India-Pakistan clashes of 2025, where he declared India's Operation Sindoor a clear-cut victory due to strategic strikes on Pakistani air bases and nuclear sites. So, first of all, sir, thank you so much for the privilege of your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's very nice to be with you here.
Thank you, sir. And the first question is that you described Operation Sindoor as a clear-cut victory for India. What specific strategic objectives did India achieve through this operation? And how did the Indian Air Force targeting of high-value assets such as nuclear storage sites contribute to this outcome?
Well, the operations by Indian Air Force have directly contributed to the success of this operation. And how was it achieved? It was achieved through, firstly, neutralizing or largely disabling the Pakistani attempts to hit India by the means of attack UAVs and artillery rockets, but also several ballistic missiles. The mass of these were shot down by Indian air defense system. And then Indian armed forces, but foremost the Air Force, went into a counteroffensive and started gradually disabling the Pakistani capability to defend the country. Foremost main with these are nuclear facilities, air bases, major military bases. So what did they do? They have first used a combination of attack UAVs and the long-range land attack missiles, usually air-launched land attack missiles, to strike selected nodes of the integrated air defense system of defending Pakistan. When this system was sufficiently suppressed, they started targeting selected air bases. And then not just air bases per se, but specific selected points at air bases, like major headquarters, command nodes, major hangars, major intersections of runways or cratering runway and so on. So this is what they did, and that from standoff range while denying Pakistan the ability to hit back upon India. And this is why then in grand total, at some point in time, Pakistan started firing ballistic missiles into India, excuse me, to which New Delhi retaliated by launching an airstrike by the means of air-launched land attack missiles of BrahMos type to hit the entrances to one or two. It was definitely 2 entrances to Pakistani underground nuclear weapon storage facilities. And with this, India has made it clear to Pakistan that Pakistan cannot defend itself. Firstly. Secondly, even more so, it has crossed at least 2 out of some 4 or 5 red lines defined by top Pakistani generals. And then actually called the bluff, because it turned out that Pakistanis were unable to install their nuclear warheads on their missiles or put them under the aircraft, attack India without India disturbing already this process, not to talk about targets, selected facilities inside Pakistan, probably eliminating Pakistani capability to actually reach their own nuclear warheads. Because if you hit the entrance to a nuclear weapon storage facility, which is underground, then nobody can go in, nobody can come out. And what is particularly important in this case, the underground nuclear weapon storage facility in question on Kirna Hills is a part of a huge military weapon storage facility just some 7 or 8 kilometers south of Sargodha Air Base. Sargodha Air Base is not only one of the most famous or one of the biggest air bases of Pakistani Air Force, but it's also a base of Pakistani Air Force F-16 aircraft. And Kirna complex is a base of a major Pakistani Air Force missile garrison. Means garrison or unit which is operating ballistic missiles with capability of reaching 2,000 kilometers far, between 700 and 200 kilometers far. It means this is the major facility for launching nuclear attacks upon India. So when then there is an underground facility within such a complex, and it is very unlikely that the Pakistani armed forces are growing vegetables inside, but more likely that even if they did not declare this facility as a nuclear facility, that they are storing their nuclear weapons inside. And what can be deducted from the results of about the results of the Indian airstrike on these entrances to this underground facility, shortly after, Islamabad was on the hotline to New Delhi and sounding for a ceasefire. So when you put all of this together, the situation is clear. India has first actually attempted to strike just terror camps, nothing else. Pakistan ignored the Indian attempt to limit this conflict to terror camps, hit back upon India with full power of its attack UAVs and artillery rockets. India then disabled Pakistan's air defense system while paralyzing or neutralizing most of the Pakistani attack into India. Then again, disabled the Pakistani air defense system, then started striking selected points inside Pakistan. With this, it was game over actually for Islamabad. They had no means left to defend themselves, and they had no means left to strike upon India. And that is why I've called this a clear-cut victory, because India established itself in a position of clear superiority vis-a-vis Pakistan. It has all of Pakistani threats about nuclear retaliation have turned out to be a big bluff, or at least have proven to be unsupported, because India could disable Pakistan's deterrent and capability to retaliate. That's why clear-cut victory.
So why do you think that then the international media and mostly the Western countries are supporting the hypothesis that Pakistan was actually victorious?
Excuse me for smiling about this, but it is like this. The Western media has a decades-long history of blaming India for whatever Pakistan does. It's as simple as that. I mean, it sounds absurd, but it is like that. Pakistan launches a terrorist attack upon India. India is to blame for provoking Pakistan into launching a terrorist attack upon India. Pakistan launches another terrorist attack upon India. India is to blame if it is not treating Pakistan in diplomatic fashion. Pakistan launches a terrorist attack. I mean, we are talking about 120 terrorist attacks into India and more than 11,000 terrorist attacks into Kashmir, just into Kashmir, since something like 2008. So this is 11,000 to 300 terrorist attacks instigated and commanded by Pakistan. So what do you expect India to do anymore? For the West, it doesn't matter. India should be the nice guys and not attack Pakistan, especially not cause any kind of military confrontation. And Pakistan is a nuclear power, so India shouldn't provoke such a nuclear power. And Pakistan is so mighty and equipped with wholly US-made F-16s, which means that Pakistan cannot lose a war. They are invincible and whatever else. Therefore, India is wrong if it comes to the idea to retaliate upon a terrorist attack. That's the version you're going to hear in most of the press over there. And in the best possible situation, there are a number of people doing similar things like I do. Then you can follow their reporting about this conflict. There are reports from 7th of May, there are reports from 8th of May, there are reports from 9th of May. And on 10th of May, they have, all turned around after the motto, oh, look, squirrel. Because there's something else that is more interesting than a showdown between two nuclear powers, like Iranian ballistic missiles or Russian attacks into Ukraine, whatever. Everything is more interesting, but just not to conclude what is obvious, which is that India has defeated Pakistan. Didn't brought it to its knees, but it was on the best way to do so, and it could have finished, another week of such pounding, and Pakistan would have been left without anything to fight, at least nothing at the strategic level. That is the point about this entire affair. And this is what is the mass of the media in the West simply not reporting for whatever reason. They're not reporting this. Unsurprisingly, now Indian government has found itself in a situation where it has to send delegations abroad to other governments to explain to different governments in the West and elsewhere what has happened and why did they act the way they did act.
Yeah.
It came so far.
Yeah, even the Pakistani government has sent its own delegation.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, so that is happening in tandem. But my next question, sir, is that because we don't know the military basics of it, but could you elaborate on the role of India's advanced weaponry, such as BrahMos and SCALP-EG missiles, which ensured the success of Operation Sindoor? So what exactly is a BrahMos missile?
Okay, BrahMos is a big tube, essentially slightly over 8 meters long tube, which has a guidance system and warhead on its top, and the rest is actually a fuel tank for a ramjet engine. Inside this tube, there is a 6 meters long Indian designed and manufactured booster. And now, let's get to the practice, to the action. BrahMos is carried either by Su-30 Mki combat aircraft of the Indian Air Force or by ships of the Indian Navy. So when it's not fired literally, it's not instantly activating when you press the button and release it. It is actually released. The weapon falls off the aircraft. Then there is a protective cap covering its intake. This cap is ejected, and then the booster ignites. The booster serves the purpose of accelerating the weapon to its cruise speed, which is something like something like a Mach 3, 3,700 kilometers per hour. So the booster accelerates the missile to 3,700 kilometers per hour, and simultaneously, depends actually on programming, or on pre-mission programming by the crew, either climbs it up to a very high speed, high altitude, or guides it to fly very low. Depends on the enemy defense systems, what kind of threats, how far is it supposed to fly, and so on. If it's, for example, if you launch a BrahMos at a target some 200 kilometers away, you can select it to fly very low, where it is very hard to detect, but in turn it's flying slower because of higher air density, or you send it to fly along very high trajectory, in which case it can fly much further at much higher speed, and it is easier to detect but harder to combat. So what the Indian Air Force did with BrahMos, for example, it hit these two entrances to the Kirna Hills underground nuclear storage facility. Why? Because it is a well-protected complex. There were heavy air defenses, Pakistani air defenses around this facility. Therefore, India has sent at least 2, if not 3, BrahMos missiles and then routed them around this facility. So to strike from, I think, western or southwestern direction, as far as I can assess on the basis of available videos which appeared in the Pakistani social media. So which means they have outflanked Pakistani air defenses to ensure higher probability of an actual strike. This is one thing that one can do with such missiles. It is similar with SCALP. SCALP is the French version of the Storm Shadow, developed to, this is a stealth missile, developed to strike deep into the enemy, behind the enemy front line or behind border. It can go as far as, depends on the version, 400 or 600 kilometers. So what is it doing? It is flying very slow, but very, very, very fast, something like 1,000 kilometers per hour. And at an altitude of, depends on programming, which in turn depends on terrain in question and possible human-made obstacles or other sorts of obstacles, but something like 20 to 60 meters. Where is the point with flying low? The lower you're flying, the more you shorten the maximum detection range from which the enemy can detect you. That means if you fly at 20 meters altitude, the enemy cannot detect it from further than 50 kilometers away because of the Earth curvature. So if your missile is then stealth, then this detection range is further shortened, which means that the enemy is left ever less time to react. So you can have a radar of 300 kilometers range, but it's not going to detect this missile, SCALP missile, from more than 20, 30 kilometers. Considering the high speed at which the SCALP is flying, this is also leaving the enemy or the enemy air defenses just 10, 15, 20 seconds of reaction time. This is extremely short under combat stress in particular. And then this missile jinks up and strikes from above, where the armor, if the enemy position is fortified, where the armor is usually thinner. So it hits and digs deep into the well, let's say enemy position before detonating. You can set it at detonator, of course, to detonate on contact, or to detonate with delay of few milliseconds or even an entire second. So this is then resulting in the missile burying itself either deeper underground or exploding already at shallow depth, so to say. And it is extremely precise. It is so precise that you can target actually enemy trucks over 600 kilometers distance. So this is and like in the case of BrahMos, you can also route it, which means you tell it, okay, at this point turn to the right or to the left, and it can fly like this, avoid the enemy defenses, and strike the target with extreme precision. So it is a highly effective missile, and the same is valid for BrahMos. The point is, major difference is that BrahMos is a bigger, more brutal missile, which is available in smaller numbers, while not Storm Shadow, but SCALP is available in higher numbers. It is a smaller weapon, more sophisticated, more expensive, so to say. Also, India is manufacturing BrahMos at home, but they are deployable only from Su-30s, while SCALP is deployable from Rafales and from Mirages at least. There is also a third variant of such a weapon deployed by Indian Air Force in this war. This is Israeli-made Rampage air-launched ballistic missile. This is a missile made to overcome such advanced air defense systems like HQ-9 and HQ-16 as operated by Pakistan. It is deployed primarily by Jaguar fighter bombers of Indian Air Force or by MiG-29 fighter bombers of the Indian Navy. What is Rampage doing? It is something like a mix of SCALP and BrahMos. You fly your Jaguar at whatever altitude, the higher, the better, and the faster, the better, because you give it more initial energy. So the missile is released, ignites its engine and goes like a ballistic missile, along a ballistic trajectory, and strikes with extreme precision. What is particularly nice about Rampage is that it has a very hefty warhead, which means, and because it's flying along ballistic trajectory, it is coming almost vertically down, which means it is extremely hard to defend from, and it is ideally positioned or ideally made to strike underground facilities. Let's say command bunkers dug some 50, 60 meters under the ground. And at least two, if not more, such weapons have been deployed by Indian Air Force as well. So this is just the weaponry of the Indian Air Force. One should not forget in this war, one of crucial roles was played by the Indian integrated air defense system, which is integrating not only the Indian Air Force and its air defense weaponry like S-400, Russian-made, like Barak 8, which is made in cooperation between India and Israel, like Akash, which is Indian-made air defense system, some 25-30 kilometers range, and which was particularly effective in shooting down the mass of Pakistani UAVs and artillery rockets, and Spider, which is a short-range air defense system, but also short-range air defense systems operated by the Indian Army. And this is unique. You have lots of attempts to achieve something similar degree of integration between air forces and armies around the world, especially in Russia. And they are never so successful as we have seen this in India. They are not even as successful in Israel, or even less so in the United States. So India has achieved something particularly special in this regards. This dense, close integration of an integrated air defense system operated by its air force with an integrated air defense system operated by its army. Why is it also important? In order not to shoot at one aircraft. You don't want to shoot, at Indian Air Force aircraft by its army. Nobody wants this to happen, but it happens time and again. In Russia, it happens in Ukraine, it happens to the United States and British during the invasion of Iraq in 2003. So you have this high level of integration, and then excellent ground-based air defense systems largely manufactured in India. And then also what was particularly surprising, because it was absolutely underreported, a large availability of large number of drone defense systems in the Indian armed forces, in particular this D4 system made by the Indian company Bell, which is capable of jamming UAVs over apparently quite a long range. So this all has contributed to Indian success. But above all, it is not only the integration which was excellent within the Indian armed forces, but the capability and training, actually capability provided through excellent training of its airmen, of its ground troops, of its gunners, and so on, and up to higher commands. Because one should keep in mind, India started this affair with striking terror targets, terror camps, and then, in reaction to Pakistani retaliation, switched its tactics 180 degrees. And not only tactics, but strategy. And firstly, you have to keep in mind, it is very rare that governments and armed forces are switching their strategy this dramatically. It happens extremely rarely. And secondly, it is very rare that the armed forces can switch this quickly in a matter of less than 24 hours and operate along fundamentally different principles. Actually, like in a sort of an all-out war short of nuclear exchange. So, and Indian armed forces did this perfectly and acted exactly like as planned, and debilitated Pakistani air defense system, debilitated Pakistani air bases, and then hit such targets. It came so far that Indian generals in New Delhi, top commanders of the armed forces, who are renowned within circles of people like me for being conservative in the way they think and command their armed forces, overcautious as well. All of a sudden, they are so courageous under post office, so self-conscious, that they have, obviously, with permission from their political masters, dared They were so sure in what they are doing that they have dared to hit an underground nuclear storage facility, actually, and entrance to an underground nuclear storage facility in Pakistan. That means they're absolutely sure Pakistan cannot hit back in similar fashion upon India, that they brought it so far. And this is, I said, this is speaking absolutely clear language for people like me. It means the other side is finished. It has no means to strike back when you do such things.
And so there was, I don't know if it is rumor or if it is true, but the entire context of nuclear leakage was circulating a lot.
Yes. The International Atomic Agency said there was no leak, there was no radiation. And this aircraft, which was widely reported in the Indian media, this is a Beechcraft, this is actually a reconnaissance aircraft, which used to be operated by US Army, but was then about 10 years ago either sold or donated to Pakistani army. Why was it flying over there? Perhaps to check if there is if there is any kind of radiation leakage, which is a normal procedure in such cases. You should keep in mind, underground facilities dug inside the hill. Whenever there is such a facility, there is always, so to say, a long approach constructed through that hill to where the doors actually are and where you actually enter this facility. So when the Indians hit these entrances, they have blocked them through gravel, to thousands of tons of gravel and rocks and earth. So Pakistanis did not know what is going on. So normal reaction is to first send such an aircraft and check if there is a radiation leak. If the facility, if the underground facility has been damaged, if the warheads stored inside have been damaged. This is normal procedure in such cases. But it doesn't automatically mean that there is a radiation. It doesn't automatically mean that there is a leak.
And how do you compare in terms of the strength of Chinese and Turkish arms and missiles that were supplied to Pakistan?
Well, on one side, some of these weapons were a surprise. And there is no denial that they are very advanced. On the other side, even the most advanced weapon is useless if the user doesn't know how to operate it. So, for example, the PL-15 air-to-air missile. This is a long-range missile which emerged about 10 years ago, almost actually. It was originally developed for the new generation of Chinese-operated stealth fighters. And they are carrying it usually within their weapons base, which are on the bottom of the aircraft. So they are released from the aircraft. The weapon bay opens, weapon is released, weapon bay closes, reestablishing the stealth configuration of the aircraft, and then the PL-15 flies away. So now there were claims that what China has supplied to Pakistan is a PL-15E, which would be an export version. And this is shorter range, just 150 kilometers and blah, 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 blah. But it turned out what they have got is a full version, which can go at least 200, if not 300 kilometers far. So, moreover, it turned out that PL-15 has a data link, with help of which it is maintaining contact with either the launching aircraft or an AWACS aircraft like Saab 2000, which is also in Pakistani service. And therefore, this AWACS aircraft can guide it over a very long range. Keep in mind the following. JF-17 and J-10 fighter bombers of Pakistani Air Force, they have radars with a range of 150 to 200 kilometers. So that means, and the missile, the PL-15, has a theoretic range of 300 kilometers. That means that neither J-10 nor JF-17 could guide it over its full range. But the AWACS, which is flying behind them, has a range of over 450 kilometers or even more. So therefore, the fighter fires the missile and the AWACS is guiding the missile to the target. Okay. So this is so-called cooperative targeting. This is a relatively new concept developed in the United States and NATO countries about 15 years ago. And we have seen its first application by the Turkish Air Force when they shot down the Russian Su-24 in November 2015. This F-16 has fired an MRAM missile from nearly 60 kilometers away at Russian Su-24, which was misidentified. Actually, the Turks thought that this is a Syrian Su-24 fighter bomber, and the missile was guided by an E-7 AWACS aircraft of the Turkish Air Force from afar, from something like 300 kilometers distance. So we have a similar situation now here. Pakistan is firing these PL-15s at Indian Air Force aircraft. And this came as a surprise for the Indian Air Force, not only because of the availability of this cooperative targeting and this range of the PL-15, but even more so because of something like unwritten rule between India and Pakistan, valid and respected by both sides over the last 20, 30 years, not to fire air-to-air missiles over the international border. Actually, not even to fire them over the line of control in Kashmir. This is the line left over from mutual wars of the last 80 years. And theoretically, you do not fire, you do not cross with your aircraft over this line or over the international border. So in practice, Pakistanis have opened fire at Indian aircraft approaching the border or the line of control to strike targets, to strike terror camps inside Pakistan, while the Indians were still some 100, 120 kilometers far away. And at least 2 or 3 Indian fighter jets were shot down by long-range strikes by PL-15, while still 80 kilometers deep inside India. Whether they were hit while approaching or while withdrawing after their strikes, that remains currently unknown, but this is a matter of fact. So this was one surprise. The other surprise was that this cooperative targeting, which means Pakistani fighters were so far away from Indian fighters that the Indians did not expect them to open fire. And secondly, cooperative targeting is almost impossible to detect by the means of electronic reconnaissance, which means Indians did not know that they were targeted until the PL-15 came so far that they have activated their own radar seeker heads. This is usually happening at a distance of 20 to 30 kilometers, which in turn means, consider the fact that PL-15 is coming down with a speed of Mach 4 or even Mach 5, which means that Indian pilots were left with really just few seconds of time to react. And it is actually a wonder that not many more Indian fighter jets have been shot down, but just 3 or 4. And because one should keep in mind, the Pakistanis didn't fire just 2 or 3 PL-15s. They have fired certainly 15, 20 of them, and just 3 or 4 of them have scored hits. Sorry.
Yeah. So there is one particular hypothesis that is going viral that India had informed Pakistan when Operation Sindoor would start.
Yes, that is a normal procedure.
Yeah, that is
a few minutes before you launch your operation, when aircraft are actually airborne. In the case of such a situation, you don't want to provoke a war. You let the other side know clearly via that diplomatic channels, or in this case, this hotline between New Delhi and Islamabad. You call them and tell them, listen, I'm going to strike at terror camps inside your country. Nothing else. I have no interest to escalate the situation into an all-out war. This is a normal procedure, so I'm not surprised about such reports.
Yeah. And so what do you think were a few weak points in the Indian air defense strategy that should be worked upon by the team in future?
Well, right now, I don't see any, because we have seen Pakistan attacking India with successive waves of 500 plus attack UAVs, artillery rockets, and then this happened on 7th of May evening, 8th of May during the day, 9th of May, plus Air Force as well, which was launching cruise missiles or land attack missiles, which was launching its own long-range weaponry and so on. And up to 90% of this weaponry fired by Pakistan at India was shot down. What's more, Pakistan has launched at least 2, probably more, ballistic missiles, longer-range ballistic missiles at India. Both were shot down. So when you ask me about weaknesses, the only potential weakness for India is that for defending itself from ballistic missiles, it largely depends upon Russian-made S-400. But India is already developing its own system, which is well, not certain, not likely, but certain to outmatch S-400. So it's, of course, going to take a few years until it is in service, and even longer until it is in widespread service, which means available in sufficient numbers to cover not only New Delhi, but all the major urban centers along in Western India, plus air bases, plus major military facilities and so on. But it is there. So I don't see any particular weakness in regard to this system. Foremost, you have all of this weaponry of Russian, of Indian, of Israeli origin, and it is perfectly integrated into one system. This is such a mammoth task you cannot imagine. I mean, excuse me for expression, I'm not patronizing anybody, but it is, I cannot emphasize this enough. I've seen air defense, integrated air defense systems at work. I witnessed it. I've been there. I've been in several command centers. I've talked with dozens of people working on them. It comes so far that they have next to almost, there is always some sort of software problems. And I guess that there were software problems with India as well. But eventually, as of 7th of May, 2025, it worked perfectly. You can't complain about this system. And what have we got in regards of evidence for any kind of Pakistani hits on that system is next to nothing. Fire and smoke somewhere in the distance. Official Islamabad never even tried to offer any kind of evidence for actually hitting anything in India. And whatever we have got are a few videos and photographs from the Indian social media showing fire and smoke somewhere in the distance. Well, perhaps it is a facility, perhaps it's grass burning next to the facility, perhaps, but nothing particularly important was hit. Foremost bases like, what is there, Pathankot, for example, like Adhampur, like Udhampur. Some of these are very big bases, with 2 or 3 squadrons of Indian Air Force aircraft or helicopters. They operate like just normally, the aircraft are flying, taking off, landing, nothing happened eventually.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I see no major flaw in this Indian air defense system.
And Trump almost, I think even yesterday, adding all of it, has taken 7 to 8 times credit of mediating the ceasefire. At the same time, US is perhaps trying to sell F-35 to India.
To India, yes.
Yeah. So do you think that it is having any utility in the age of drone warfare, as asked by Anurag?
My standpoint is that there is no Wunderwaffe, as we call it in German, no wonder weapon. No weapon that can beat everything and defeat everything and whatever comes its way or whatever mission it has to complete, and it's going to win the war and something like that. F-35 is no exception from this rule. It is very advanced, no dispute about this. But on the other hand, when you buy F-35, you also buy or pay the Americans to have a kill switch for F-35. Why? Because they can turn off the provision of software for the jet. Then you have only very limited capabilities on it left. So while it is very advanced, as long as you are operating it and everything is functioning normally, you're also supplying some of your most sensitive secrets to the Americans by operating F-35, because they can track where is a single aircraft flown, where is it right now, what is it doing, how far, how high, how fast is it flying, and so on. For a country like India, I'm not sure you want this capability under apostrophes.
No, I agree.
I understand that India needs a stealth fighter jet. There is no doubt about this. In this regards, India is already now 15, 20 years behind its major rival, which is China, and very likely it is at least possible that Qatar is going to pay Pakistani acquisition of J-35s from China. So in that case, you urgently need stealth fighters. There is no doubt about this. But buying a dubious off-the-shelf product from the United States, I'm not sure this is an ideal solution. I know that many in Europe are meanwhile kind of freezing at the thought of what could Trump do with all the F-35s operated by European NATO air forces. You don't want this to happen to you. So one side, this is, I said, there are these issues. And then on the other side, you have Trump or somebody like Trump in charge of the United States. The person is an egocentric on ego trip, and on dope on ego trip. And he's going to claim everything for himself. He's a power broker. He's a deal broker. He is the peacemaker. He is this, he is that. As far as I know, Pakistan was already or Islamabad was already on the hotline to New Delhi before Trump became involved. The Americans said something else. The media is saying something else. But so I don't have a firm confirmation. I cannot tell you, look, here it is, black and white. It happened this and that way. But as far as I know, things were already done between Islamabad and New Delhi on the morning of 10th of May, before the US administration became involved. So to be sincere, I'm ignoring something like 99% of statements by President Trump and his administration. At most, they come here on this year and they go out of this on this year, and that's it.
Yeah. And sir, my last question is, and I agree with the fact about buying, any kind of foreign arms and armaments by India, because I guess I might be wrong about the date or the year, but I think 7 to 8 years back, when Prime Minister Modi stated that by 2025 India will have its own military industrial complex. That was something which I was really proud of at that point of time, because most of our import is from France, Israel, Russia,
yes,
and that shares a lot of our sovereignty or secrets.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, they know what you can do.
Yeah.
I find this, excuse me now, it is no critique or something. I'm just explaining you my point of view. I find this kind of Indian uncertainty about their own power very, very strange. Because for me, for example, I grew up with something like realization, and that was already back in the 1980s and 90s. India is a superpower. So I never understand why don't Indians consider themselves a superpower? And why is India a superpower? Because already then you had aircraft industry, you were manufacturing your own tanks, your own warships, you had the capability, you had nuclear weapons. So you were importing just specific items, high technology items all the time. And with the time, gradually you decrease the amount of high-tech imports for your defense purposes. So I never understood this. I've talked and worked a lot with different Indians all the time, over the decades, really. With poor people from Rajasthan, we put people from Punjab, from everywhere around India, and also with defense experts and with veterans of the Indian Armed Forces. But I never understood this, because it was present in the minds of everybody that they do not consider themselves a superpower, or India for superpower. This is something I never understood why.
Thank
I did.
you very much for giving the thought.
No, it is simply a matter of fact. So nowadays you have a huge defense sector. The only thing where you are lagging is production of jet engines, which is why, for example, Tejas, there are problems with Tejas. You have to import engines from the United States. No good idea. You need your own manufacturer, designer and manufacturer of jet engines, and that are powerful jet engines. To make sure, this is no easy task, because if you check what the Chinese went through, they were all the time importing jet engines from abroad as well. And it took them something like 20 years of massive investment into research and development until they have obtained the capability to manufacture jet engines powerful enough to power their latest fighter jets, but also such compatible with transport aircraft, which is entirely different types of engines. So it is not an easy task. And this is the only thing where I'm missing some kind of development, serious development in India. There is a project in this regards, but it is not really moving forward right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You're not lacking in anything in regards of being a nuclear power. You have your own submarines, nuclear-powered submarines equipped with ballistic missiles. Okay, they are small and ballistic missiles are short range, but you don't want to nuke London or Washington. You want to nuke Islamabad if the need arises. So you don't need a range of 15,000 kilometers. You need a range of 2,000 kilometers. This is perfectly enough.
Yeah, no, thank you for the validation, because all the Indian students and experts who would be watching it would suddenly feel very, validated. And suddenly that helps somehow. And my last question is, sir, is, and it can be just paranoia, but do you think that whatever happened between the border of India-Pakistan was just a diversion by China to test the military, air, and navy defense capacity of India, while it can really actually intervene through the northeastern states? Because China started naming places in Arunachal Pradesh just recently. So just like a diversion.
I know what you mean. I don't see China being as aggressive as that. It has a potential to do that. No doubt about this. It could arrange such an operation, or such a conspiracy, if you like. But the point is this: generally, the Chinese Communist Party is busy keeping the population happy, which means it needs to supply them with improve their living standards. How do you improve these living standards? Through improving your economy, to constantly improving your economy. And this means you need ever more markets and ever bigger shares on the international markets. This is what the Chinese government is, this corresponding policy is what the Chinese government is pursuing for 20, 30 years meanwhile. So now, them causing a major war between India and Pakistan, I doubt this for a simple reason that they know that the war is destabilizing the markets. Market shares are going down. They're exporting less. They don't need this. So what they need is stability. And we have seen this also in Pakistan over the last few years. China has attempted to construct this new Silk Road or whatever this initiative was called, and with the highway, with the railways and so on. What happened? It sent its engineers and officials to Pakistan. They started planning this stress and so on. And what happened as next? Pakistanis started assaulting these people. So eventually, China had to abandon this initiative, which cost it already millions, just spent for planning, for developing the necessary infrastructure to construct this Silk Road. And it came so far that when Islamabad last year requested a loan of 1.47 billion in order to remain afloat, Beijing said, you know what? Sorry, we are not going to continue creating it. Why? Because Pakistan is wasting billions for its arms and for jihadism and jihad import-export business from Nigeria to the Philippines and whatever else, just not for economic development. With this, Pakistan is no more interesting or potentially interesting market for Chinese. The situation nowadays is fundamentally different than it was in the 1990s. In the 1990s, the Chinese industry was in need of Pakistani expertise in regards of quality standards in particular. So it needed Pakistanis to tell them how well should something be manufactured. For example, for F-7 jets, which are not in service anymore. And this resulted with massive improvement in quality of Chinese weapons industry, for example. Then also electronics, because in order to equip that jet, F-7, the Pakistanis were importing Italian radars and British ejection seats and similar items, which were then, of course, disassembled, studied, reverse engineered, and so on in China. So to learn about the secrets of Western high tech and to install it in their aircraft. But it was 20 years ago. Meanwhile, they are further, much better developed. They have their own high tech, which is in certain regards even better. They don't need that anymore. So what kind of strategic interest is there left in for China in Pakistan? Well, right now there are no major tensions between China and India along the border. Therefore, they have no interest in sparking even more tensions than they are already suffering from the war in Ukraine, partially because West is threatening them with or at least Western Europe is threatening them with economic sanctions in the case they would be found of delivering weaponry to Russia. The USA are pressing them, threatening them with tariffs and so on and so on. So they are not really after sparking another war between India and Pakistan, whatever. I adopt this for all of these reasons. It is rather so that Pakistan has a standing interest in destabilizing India through terror attacks, and this is a story going on for actually back to 1965 Operation Gibraltar, when they sent jihadists into Kashmir for the first time. So I said I adopt that Beijing is kind of provoking a war, because when you follow their politics, foreign politics, wherever they go, is to bribe the local authorities into indebting themselves to Beijing for decades in advance, into letting Chinese companies make major construction projects or take over major construction projects and so on and so on. This is what they are doing, but they are not provoking wars. They are searching for ways to earn cash. With other words, not wars. So, even if you check, best example, Yemen. Chinese started delivering ever more weaponry to Saudi Arabia, for example, which theoretically one would say, hey, the war in Yemen, which began in 2015 or even earlier, actually, if strictly speaking, was an ideal situation for them because it was opening markets for them. But what did they do? Instead of prolonging that war and selling ever more arms, they went over there and made peace or negotiated a peace agreement between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis. So if they are interested in warfare, in wars, by doing something of that kind. Why did they do that? In order to make sea lines over the from the Indian Ocean to the Red Sea, to Europe, safe. And what happened was next? In order to support Israel, the Americans and Europeans then started striking Houthis, which was some sort of nonsensical idea. It was obvious they couldn't do that for longer than a few months because they're not nearby, so they don't have any major bases right on the spot, somewhere in the Red Sea or in the Bay of Aden or similar. So it was actually pointless. And Houthis, after 10 years of fighting the Saudis and coalition, or more than 10 years of fighting air power, they are experts in survival. So that meant whatever bombs the Americans or the Israelis drop on them, they are going to hit perhaps few Houthi combatants, but primarily Yemeni civilians, nothing else, because they are excellently hiding them. But what the Chinese did was, as I said, they negotiated a peace agreement in order to secure the sea lines, because it's a better method than fighting a pointless war. And what happened now in the end, you see Trump also making a peace agreement with Houthis after bombing them for another several weeks. So you see that the Chinese way in this regard is a better idea, obviously, or an idea which is better working. They are deal brokers. Yeah, they are more so than Trump.
They mediated a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. In fact, for the Palestinian 13 plus Palestinian factions were in China for delegation. Then apart from that, China, the most interesting thing is that the US is almost like 12,000 or 18,000 kilometers away from us. But the soft and economic power that it has on the narrative, it's completely very, it's the fog of war that is created and literally recreated with US taking ownership 12 to 14, 18,000 kilometers away of everything.
USA, their power is meanwhile, at least as far as from my point of view, it looks like it's of different quality nowadays. They do not have this industrial power anymore. They do not have this strategic ideas anymore. They have no solutions for anything. Essentially, the only power they have is to control the markets and then specific segments of the markets and market shares, and they are excellent in gambling. because modern day markets are little less than gambling. You're gambling that tomorrow this share is going to cost much more than it costs today. And then you are acting in favor of making this share more expensive tomorrow than it is today. And this is all. This is the American speciality nowadays. So the super rich people are earning billions. Now they are, yes, somebody has just not noticed this gambling to tariffs. It came so far that the president of the United States is not thinking about developing the economy, boosting the economy to different measures and new laws and new regulations. No, he's gambling that through tariffs he's going to decrease the U.S. deficit. I mean, this is absolutely impossible to do. Even you can calculate it mathematically, it's not going to work. But no, he's doing that as well.
Yeah.
So they have also, when you check the U.S. behavior during the war in Ukraine, in reaction to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the USA did not, even under Biden, they did not try to reinforce Ukraine to the level that this could successfully defend itself from Russia. No, they were modeling some sort of outcome where Russia wouldn't be defeated too much, Ukraine would survive with an uncertain outcome, and so on and so on. There's no strategy to win the war, but you're fighting a war in order to profit from the war. We have seen this also in Afghanistan, the same. They're fighting the war for profit, but not in order to win. So for 20 years, they did nothing. Essentially, the same percentage of local population was illiterate like 20 years before. And, everybody is essentially poor. It's ideal breeding ground for jihadism and so on and so on. So what did they spend 3 trillion for in the 20 years? Nobody knows, except for money laundering de facto, taxpayers' money into private pockets. This is the only thing clear and certain. The USA, from my point of view, lacks strategy. It's just like the West. They lack strategy. They lack far sight. They do not think beyond the next elections, even if so far, most of the times it's just the next 2 to 3 weeks. And good television. What's going to be reported this evening on the TV? And who cares? Tomorrow, when you ask Trump, on one day he says something. On the next day he cannot recall he has ever said that. His aides are doing the same, and it's the same again. The same with the Austrian politicians. On one day they are bringing a law against illegal immigration, which they know is against the EU law. So in 1 or 2 years it's going to be prohibited. The EU is going to react and say, hey, you can't bring that law. This is against the EU law. Then they are going to withdraw this law. But now they are doing this because this is making them more popular. And this is so tiresome. We have so many troubles. There is so much need to improve the lives of people, to help the people, to take care about the environment, to stop these absolutely insane wars and so on. No, they are taking care about such things.
Yeah, no, that is there. And according to Trump, the India-Pakistan conflict and Kashmir issue is like 1,500 years old. And we have been fighting for 1,500 years. And that will work for me.
It eventually doesn't matter whether you are fighting for 2,000 years or 5,000 years or 2 years. What does matter is the following. India has found a way to stop these Pakistani threats and this, because there was an endless row of Pakistani threats. We are going to nuke you if you do this. We are going to nuke you if you do that. We are going to nuke you if you raise your small finger like this. We are going to nuke you if you and this is now over.
Yeah.
Now Pakistan, provided the leadership in Islamabad is sane enough and sober enough to realize this, the situation is entirely new. It is, if Pakistan, does something India does not like, boom, India can repeat the exercise. Most likely in some entirely new fashion, which the Pakistanis will then have to figure the next time. But right now I expect, well, at least I hope that this is going to quieten the situation for the next 20 to 30 years. Like the war of 1971 has also, brought peace and stability for something like 20 years after.
Let's hope so. And with this, thank you so much for the privilege of your time.
Very much my pleasure.
And explaining to us from the very basics that we can understand it. And also, what you're doing is empowering in a way because it gives a certain kind of dream to young scholars to follow your path instead of the stereotypical paths that are there, and to research on it and to become like you. And that demands, I must tell everyone, it demands a lot of sacrifice, passion, and a lot of understanding of your own personal costs, what you are, the emotional, financial, safety related, all of that. So, but at the same time, this is really very, for us, it was a very, very important day today at Middle East Insights that you endowed your presence, because not only it was the 100th lecture or whatever, but the fact that your legacy, uh, we hope to archive that, and to ensure that those whoever are interested to learn more can always have access to whatever you have said today.